So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 edition of the State of the Union, organized by the European University Institute in Florence, and in particular to our Fringe Event on the EU-Africa Digital Partnership in a Changing World. My name is Andrea Castagna, and I'm a member of the European Digital Development Alliance, an European association which represents think tanks, civil societies, and individual experts and focusing on digital policies for digital cooperation and development. I would like to introduce you to the speaker of this Fringe event. We have Zuzanna Zlatkova, policy leader and fellow at the School of Transnational Governance of the European University Institute, who is also giving us very shortly a short introduction of the topic of this panel. We have also Dorothy Gordon, who is the chair of the UNESCO Information for All program and board member of the UNESCO Institute for Information Technologies. We also have Onika Magwagwa, head of Africa sector of Alliance for Affordable Internet and the World Wide Web Foundation. And last but not least, we have Björn Richter, head of Digital Development Program for GIZ. So thank you for joining us today. Just a quick technical remark. Our panel will be a Q&A session in which I will be asking each of you a question. I please ask you to stick on the time so we don't go too long, because I know that the State of the Union this year has a very dense and interesting digital program. And I'm also asking the audience of this panel to tweet about this session by using the hashtag SOU2021. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I'm giving now the floor to Zuzanna to introduce the panel.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So let's start with digital transformation that is happening now and everywhere. And in the past year, it was accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is an essential instrument to enable sustainable development and inclusive growth, but it is also a relatively new part of the EU's foreign policy. From Council conclusions on mainstreaming digitalization into development cooperation in 2016, we have now digital transformation as a key priority for the Global Europe Instrument. Digital transformation embedded into key documents of the EU, such as Gender Action Plan 3 or the EU Africa Strategy, with Digital for Development Hub created last December as a multi-stakeholder forum. Many challenges, but also opportunities are still to be addressed. Today, we will discuss specific areas on which the EU and Africa is willing to cooperate and exchange best practices while learning from each other. We start with digital challenges. So what is feasible to achieve and what capacities African countries need to have for the digital transformation? Second part is about options for creation of genuine partnership. And at the end, we brainstorm on the conditions of leaving no one behind in the digital transformation. So now I give back floor to you, Andrea, to lead us throughout the meeting.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Zuzanna. So maybe let's start, as you say, from digital transformation, which is happening now and everywhere. And it's a topic that has also been accelerated by the COVID-19, and it's a crucial for African and European Union partnership. So I have my first question for Dorothy. So Dorothy Gordon, what is feasible to achieve and what capacity African countries have to prepare for digital transformation according to your opinion and professional experience?
I would say that we are uniquely placed in Africa because we don't have so many legacy systems to actually catch up extremely fast when it comes to digitalization. However, there are a number of challenges when it comes to capacities. So first of all, let me say very clearly that Africa is very concerned that it does not slip into a further dependency mode. It does not want to be simply a consumer of technologies. It also wants to be able to produce the technologies that it uses to strengthen its institutions, to strengthen its outreach to the most vulnerable. And if we're going to do that, I think that there's a huge overhaul that we need to put in place of our educational systems. First of all, in higher education, and I would say in general, policy seems to think in terms of digital means computer science. But when we talk about digital transformation, we recognize this is totally cross-sectoral. So we need to have that kind of review of our higher education, even as we are looking at what we are doing in basic education, in secondary education, and particularly in the area of media and information literacy for the entire population. And I will end just by stressing that at the moment, we see far too much emphasis on key communication around digitalization that is only in the legacy colonial languages. We need to make sure that we put this in the languages that are used by the bulk of the population and which they can understand. We also need to put a lot of attention on building up our businesses. And so far, we see a lot of emphasis on startups, but once you've ended your startup phase and you're actually trying to grow your business to a level that you can start competing, it's very difficult to get resources. In the interest of time, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dorothy. I think like you touched some key areas that maybe we can explore a bit longer in the panel. I have now a question for Bjorn, because Susanna was mentioning the recent development between the EU and African partners, namely Global Europe, EU-Africa, EU and the African Union Digital Economy Task Force, D4D Hub. So my question for you is, to what extent can the EU and member states help Africa to address digital development challenges, according to your opinion?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe building upon what Dorothy said, it's an innovative new approach for both continents. And what we saw in December when Ms. von der Leyen and also the German Chancellor launched the D4D Hub was that this was a joint launch by civil society, by tech companies, and also by Smart Africa as one of the digital innovative actors on the African soil. So this is a joint endeavor. So I believe we cannot support or help somebody, but we actually are in a real cooperation when it comes to digital for development. Now that D4D Hub is an important tool to facilitate cooperation with member states, their development cooperation, their foreign office cooperation, their economic cooperation, but also with startups Dorothy mentioned, with African digital ministries, and obviously what we call the ecosystem in the different countries, and also on Pan-African level. So for us, coming from the European side, the D4D Hub should serve the human-centric digital development model. We know that there are other models being implemented, but we believe that is what Europe can bring to the sovereignty, the digital sovereignty to Africa. It's learning from what we did in Europe in the last couple of years. Now, concretely speaking, we see that projects are implemented. Yeah, for example, the SOMAS project in West Africa is implementing since last year already a pandemic monitoring system that is now being rolled out to the IGAD region, to East Africa, and this pandemic system is also covering a COVID model. So we are actually working with digital on COVID, and interestingly enough, this model developed on African soil is now being implemented in Germany in the health centers. That really shows us that we are on eye level. Yeah. We are also together with the European Union implementing a digital learning platform called YOMA, where startups and young people can learn through learning nuggets and can really implement this success and the reality in their own work. And last one, I think Dorothy mentioned, there are so many African languages, and still the colonial languages are used for education. Africa is working that through artificial intelligence translation into African languages, voice-to-voice translation can be possible. So we are seeing this and we're supporting this, for example, in Rwanda, that Kenya, Rwanda can be utilized as voice-to-voice implementation directly. Last one, I think also very concrete, we saw that the COVID pandemic gave really birth to new approaches. Facilitating the smart development hack with 1,000 ideas, we saw really how the ecosystem is responding, and we're seeing now how the implementing SMS-based information systems. We also seeing now how the implementing systems to allow hospital beds registrations, and we're also seeing digital innovation now coming on board for the COVAX campaign to facilitate better vaccination. So it's happening not tomorrow, it's happening now, and we see that leapfrogging works already in the African soil. And again, Europe is a learner as well. It's not somebody that is giving something. I think we're on eye level here. That's absolutely new for international cooperation, and I think we are in this together.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bjorn, for your reply. I think that it's true. It's an innovative approach, and I think like there are a lot of challenges, and education, as Dorothy was mentioning, is definitely one of them. I have now a question for Onika. Onika, according to your personal and professional experience, do African countries have the capacity and the political willingness to work on digital transformation with an international actor such as the European Union? You're on mute.
Great question. So I think what's really great here is the fact that there is a recognition of a need to connect even more people. I mean, we are at a point where over 50% of the global, just a little over 50% of the global population is now online, whereas in Africa, very few countries are even at that 50% mark. So there's a great understanding of the need, and therefore the need to respond differently. However, I think one of the things that Dorothy brought up is the legacy relationship between Europe and Africa is such that we probably have a little bit of a trust deficit, right? And therefore, there is a need to be very intentional in terms of how that partnership evolves, but not just only intentional, but inclusive. And by that, I mean that, you know, we need to be looking at a more of a multi-stakeholder type approach where we are not leaving civil society behind, because that trust deficit is not only between the two continents, but it's also between citizens and governments in both continents, actually. So, you know, and that contributes to the political will. The political will, really, I would like to challenge us to say, it's the will of the people. You know, we are emerging democracies, some very old democracies, but there's really a need for us to understand that for a long time we've developed we've worked on digital development, leaving civil society behind, while they were actually contributing quite tremendously towards this development. So the point where the partnership with Europe and Africa would come in would really be around looking at what Africa needs now in terms of investments for connectivity, but creating and supporting the policy frameworks that would actually support this investment in a way that is centered around inclusivity, but also in a way that gives room for Africans to actually lead in their development, because we really need to change this legacy around where, you know, Africa is just seen simply as the market for the next mobile technology or mobile or whatever technology, digital technology is out there, but begin to really recognize that there's innovation that happens in this region and give and partner in such a way that we give space for that innovation to also lead. So it truly is not, it's a combination of market driven, but also driven by the development needs of the region. And that's something that we really have not seen, and part of the reason why even the startup ecosystem is challenged, because it's really been around developing for the next Uber of Africa, the next Zoom of Africa, the next What of Africa, where we have not really centered that innovation around Africa's needs and imagined that perhaps the next Amazon of Africa looks more like Makola Market in Ghana and less so like the Amazon and the Walmart development that we see. So the political will, I think, will come from the will of the people, but also it will come from us giving space to actually listen to what Africa needs and develop around Africa's needs, not around opening Africa's markets to Western goods. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Monica. You touched so many different topics. It's certainly true that creating a multilateral and multi-beneficial digital partnership between the EU and Africa is a challenge. And, you know, there is also like this legacy that still prevents us to create maybe like an environment where we can trust and exchange best practices between each other. So my question for Bjorn is now, can be the D4D hub the right place to create this genuine partnership between African and European countries with a mutual exchange of best practices, lesson learned, especially if we take into consideration that different member states have different interests when it comes to digital cooperation with Africa?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Look, I think it's difficult to answer. I would rather suggest we try it out, because we're working in an area, digital transformation is very disruptive. There are new approaches needed, and we all know, for example, how M-Pesa implemented leapfrogging from no bank account to digital bank account. So I would say if you talk to digital transformation experts, nobody can really predict what is happening in the next 5 years. What is very predictable is that digital transformation needs new partnerships, like what my colleagues laid out, that we need to work with civil society, we need to work with tech companies, we need to work with the partner countries, and obviously also with innovative actors like the startup world. So what I would suggest is, as long as the governments that are supporting the D4D hub, coming from 11 member states of the EU and the European Commission, as long as they are able to allow new innovative approaches like design thinking, like Scrum for project development, like also bringing people on from civil society and tech companies on eye level to this cooperation, I think it has a very good chance to bear fruits. What I believe is also important is that the European Union should not be shy, but actually share its experiences on the GDPR, on the data security, and its experiences how to implement that, on artificial intelligence, on the data package that was just released, and also on the data sharing agreements between business to business and business to government agreements, because they're really leading the world in a certain way. Now, I honestly believe we are still far from understanding how this actually unfolds into our society, and what does that make with our regulations, and what does it make with our own digital sovereignty. So that's why I would emphasize, if the D4D hub is a space that is creating on eye level, if the African partners with the whole ecosystem approach entering into cooperation and saying we would like to have the support of the European Union and its member states for our digital sovereignty, for our data markets, to build up our own digital economy, and at the same time the European Union is very clear with its member states we would like to also learn from approaches on African soil. I think then the D4D hub can be the right system. But the bottom line is, this is an innovative approach, and it needs to be led by very clear and bold decision makers that give space for digital innovations, and at the same time have a very bold investment understanding, A, on the political level, and B, obviously on the financial level. We see this is happening, but the speed is not enough. We should be faster, and that's why I would emphasize on saying the more colleagues are working with the D4D hub as an initiative, the more it actually will allow what you just requested for, that this should be the right place to facilitate partnerships.
Well, thank you very much, Bjorn. I think like ambition is the key word that we can take out from what you just say. And for sure, there are like some areas, regulatory framework, GDPR, in which the EU can effectively cooperate with African countries. At the same time, I think Annika was mentioning connectivity and digital infrastructure investment as a priority. So I have a question now for Dorothy. What are the areas, according to your opinion, that should be the priority for the cooperation between the EU and African partners? Also, if we consider that there are different geopolitical interests and other actors that are massively cooperating with Africa in the field of digital.
That is an excellent question. And I'm glad you mentioned the other partners, because it's very important that we keep that in mind, that we have a context which is not exclusive, that there are many players here. But, you know, going back to Annika, at a very high level, the African Union has clearly given its support to this partnership between Africa and Europe. So we have that high level commitment. But as Annika mentioned, whether or not anybody, the average person in Africa walking along the street, the civil society organizations, whether they're aware of the partnership even, is a big issue. Now, you were asking about the priorities. There are two. Let me give two major priorities for Africa. One of them is jobs. You know that we are going to have about 375 million young people hitting our job market in 2030, what is known as the youth bulge. And the second is that many jobs are being taken away from our people and our most vulnerable people because of climate change. So we look at those two, and then we have other geopolitical imperatives such as the nature of conflict, the situation that the US left for us in Libya, which is allowing insecurity within the entire West African region. And of course, we have lots of conflicts throughout the region as well. But priorities, rather than, and then also let me mention that we have a very heterogeneous continent. And what we have seen is in the past, partners, development partners, or as they were previously known, donors, tend to focus on those markets where they think they will be able to satisfy their own interest in terms of selling goods. However, and that means that the most vulnerable countries, the LDCs, they have not received enough attention. And because they have not received enough attention, they are far behind. So we have a very unequal development when it comes to digital in Africa. And that unequal development is not just in terms of country differences between countries, but it also affects the differences between sexes. So you see that African women are not participating fully in this digital transformation. So that for me is definitely a priority. The other thing which is a big priority and makes it look completely worthless to discuss this is we do have an energy crisis. And if we don't address the energy crisis, there's no way that we are going to successfully take the internet, for example, to our most rural areas. So these are a few of the things that we must address, that I would see that the EU partnership has to address these things head on. Definitely, I hope that they will not leave any women behind. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dorothy. I think you touched two very crucial aspects of the cooperation between the EU and African countries. So I have now questions for Annika. So Dorothy was, actually I have two questions for Annika, because Bjorn was mentioning like the cooperation in terms of framework for government, B2P, etc., such as the GDPR. So how can we ensure the cooperation in these fields can be both demand-driven and effective for people, government, and business, meaning all the actors involved in digitalization. And also, like another question that was raised on the topic that Dorothy just raised. So, how can we make also this cooperation inclusive, and how can we see this cooperation in a way that it's effectively supporting inclusiveness of women in digital cooperation?
Right. You know, in terms of making sure that we are moving more towards demand-driven development, it's really important that we do consultations that include civil society, private sector, as well as government in all of our recommendations. In fact, the Alliance for Affordable Internet has actually adopted some good practices around policy frameworks, for example, to increase affordability, and we continue to work on looking at meaningful access and connectivity for people. So it's really critical that we don't continue to leave civil society behind in these conversations and actually center them, quite frankly, in this development. In order to make sure that our digital development is inclusive, it has to center women. I mean, it was in 1985, I believe, when women met in Nairobi and came out with a very bold declaration and demonstration that women literally carry the world. And just a week ago, Oxfam issued a report on the inequality virus that actually shows that during COVID 1 year, women lost $800 billion in income in the economy. So it's no doubt, especially in Africa, that women are the drivers of the economy. So we can't really be talking about developing our digital world as well as digital economies when we have not centered women in that. And that then means that not only do we have to focus on policy frameworks around deploying the infrastructure where the women are, in rural areas included, because that's another big growing divide, is the urban and rural divide. But also that we are focusing on some of the demand side issues for this connectivity. And key for me, especially when it comes to women, is digital skills, making sure that we are investing in infrastructure frameworks as well as in developing the digital skills so for utilization of this connectivity, as well as local content. I think we are coming to a point where we need to be very careful of how we have allowed digital to develop in an English-only state, and that in order for us to truly say we are bringing everyone along, we must develop digital content that is actually relevant to people in the countries where we are developing it for. And simply translating information that's originally written in English for English context to a local language is not the kind of dynamic digital content environment that we are hoping for. So for me, that inclusivity requires being able to incentivize even these investments so that we begin to measure this. It baffles me how for so many years we've had all these wonderful policies about gender equality, about making sure we don't leave anyone behind, but somehow we have failed to create the monitoring systems that actually ensures that these are fully implemented, right? I'm sure every country has a law or policy that speaks to pay equity, for example, yet we still have inequality in income, so in salaries. So I think for me, in terms of this partnership, where it would go to a higher level would be to actually create incentives and consequences. You know, there needs to be consequence management in a relationship where partners promise to deliver certain things and fail to do so per the agreement. Otherwise, these become sort of, the agreements that nations sign, but, we come to expect not much of it. So my hope really is that women are centered, in all the policies that are incentivized through the program, and that they are seen as the oxygen for driving digital economies, especially in Africa.
So thank you very much, Onika. I have maybe a follow-up for Dorothy. Considering what Onika just said, do you believe that the current EU Digital Africa strategy will impact positively on vulnerable people if you consider that there should be like many priorities, including education and digital skills? And if so, how?
Well, I think that Bjorn said it all. He said that this is something which is in its nascent state. We're at the beginning. It will be very difficult for us to assess now how much impact it will have on vulnerable people. But when I was thinking about this issue, I realized that we have a multiplicity of EU programs that need to synergize. For example, you have the program on, I think it's Task Force for Rural Africa, which focuses on food and farming. And then you have the new Africa Sustainable Investment and Jobs, I think, program. So there are possibilities there in terms of synergy with other programs. But what we've seen so far when it comes to digital is there's a tendency to focus on the people in the larger cities where it's easier to have well-educated people who speak English or French or Portuguese, whichever colonial language. And we tend to neglect the rest. And then we are totally unrealistic when we think about schools. You see people saying, oh, we are developing great digital content for African schools, or we are localizing content. And meanwhile, the vast majority of these schools, even in urban areas, do not have access to electricity at all, let alone bandwidth. And we know that mobile internet is not the best for teaching and learning. So I believe, frankly, that Africa-EU partnership, it has to be a partnership. And the African Union itself and its member states have to look very deep down to see how they can make this digital transformation work for the bulk of their population. This is something that we have to do together. And we have to ask Europe, because there are vulnerable people in Europe. How did you reach out effectively to the vulnerable people in Europe? There are people who cannot read in Europe. There are people who come with different languages into different contexts. How was this done? So I think that the spirit of the partnership is going to be with mutual learning and a lot of humility, because as Bjorn said, much of this has never been done before. It's got to be very innovative. I've worked all my career with the vulnerable, and I've been horrified at some of the costs we have imposed upon them with our experimentation. So let's have a listening ear and really understand what their needs are before taking up their precious time and energy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dorothy. Maybe I have like a very quick comment because we're running out of time, and maybe like a question to Bjorn. So we are seeing that, there are different ways to promote cooperation with Africa, but how do we ensure that the digital cooperation through development and through cooperation in the digital sphere doesn't look like a sort of neo-colonialism, according to your opinion?
Yes, thanks. Maybe to be very, very sharp on this one, from what we see is that for digital development, the good old development cooperation, we send money somewhere and help ourselves and help somewhere, has ended. Like Dorothy laid out, we have a totally new system of cooperation here, which is has enormous potentials. Yeah, we see this with the campaigns on e-skills for girls, where the support to digital skills for young females in the ICT sectors has been developed in the last couple of years. We see this also in the startup system, and we definitely see also that there are new unicorns being developed in Egypt and other countries. Fantastic. But I also would like to say digital has two coins. There are a lot of challenges. The internet access in Africa is widening as we speak. It's not closing, it's widening because of the population growth. Their drones and social scoring systems are being used for surveillance and are being utilized against human rights defenders. And data markets are exploited by foreign companies. And the data value creation, the data economy, the value creation is being utilized for the for the benefit in other countries. So I just wanted to say there are also challenges, and in this I think we are in together, Europe and Africa. So what I believe is the offer of the D4D hub and also the activities on digital development is a value-based approach to really work on digital sovereignty. Now, how this looks can be seen at the EU-AO data flagship that was launched between the African Union and the European Union, also in December. Where we are working together with regulatory authorities of 30 countries to precisely do what my colleagues in the panel already laid out. We would like to support the creation of African-owned data markets and its value creation for the people. Now hasn't been done so far, even in Europe in a lot of areas. Also, the European digital market is only 2-3 years old, however you want to call that. And I think it's time to do that, but it's also time to understand this is a huge challenge that needs bold leadership. And the last one, how that effort doesn't look like neocolonialism or oppression even. I believe following the digital principles for donor cooperation that DIAL, the International Organization of Digital Donor Coordination, has been set up and has been endorsed by more than 200 organizations from development agencies, from companies, from entrepreneurs, and from civil society, would build a very clear and good framework. And there you see the support of the ecosystem. There you see also things like open source and reusable ideas. And I believe that is not a European, that is a worldwide owned principles, and we should follow these principles in order to make sure it's really for the benefit of the people on both continents. I have to say this one is new on both continents.
Thank you very much, Bjorn. I have then a very last quick question to Susanna. Susanna, what are the final messages that we can bring out from this panel today?
Thank you very much, Andrea. I have to say it's very difficult to summarize, but there are a few messages that came out very clearly, and that this digital partnership between Africa and EU is a new way how to overcome the legacy relationship, and also not to create a new dependency between the two continents. It's a way for the new genuine partnership where both sides, on all the stakeholders on both sides, can actually benefit from working together, and to bring the human-centric development not only to the people in the cities, but to all people in every part of Europe and of Africa. And we have to localize, not only in terms of the local needs, but also the local languages. And one message which was really nicely said is that women are actually oxygen for driving digital transformation.
Well, thank you very much, Susanna. I think that these are really the key areas for cooperation, and it's crucial that, for instance, men and women benefit the same from digital transformation. I see that we have a timer that is ticking here on the screen, so I wanted to thank you all the speakers of this panel, Bjorn Richter from GIZ, Onika Makwakwa, Dorothy Gordon, and Susanna Zlatkova for being with us. Well, thank you also to the people who attended our Fringe event. I would like to encourage to follow more the program of the State of the Union. Please stay tuned for the next panel. thank you for being with us, and of course, like keep in touch with us, with the speakers, or with the European Digital Development Alliance to further discuss the topic of EU cooperation with African countries. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the program of the State of the Union.
Thank you, Andrea.